My name is Lillian, I am 32 years old, and just a few months ago I was, frankly, sure that my life was quite ordinary, smooth as a country road, not too winding, with occasional potholes, but still predictable. My parents live about an hour's drive from my house, not close enough to visit them every week, but not so far that I have to make excuses for every missed holiday. I have a younger sister, Barbara. She is 28, Barbie, as I have affectionately called her since childhood. Is not at all like me. She is easygoing, impulsive, able to make anyone laugh even on the grayest day. She has a 5-year-old daughter, my niece Livy, and this little one is a real miracle, golden curls, eyes like two blue lakes, and such a laugh that even tired old people in the park smile when they hear it. Barbara had once been married to a guy named Mark, who seemed reliable if a little boring. They had divorced 2 years ago, when Livy was just starting to speak in full sentences and naively confused Daddy with the uncle Barbara had invited over for Christmas. I remember Barbie standing at my door in tears, me holding her shoulders as she sobbed, explaining that she couldn't live with a man who made her feel invisible. As for me, well, that's a lot more complicated. Frankly, I was married too, for 8 years, and all that time I believed, no, I knew that Jason and I had a good marriage, at least, I wanted to believe it. We laughed, we shared coffee in the morning, we made plans for the future, and most of all, we wanted children. I wanted to be a mother the way a person wants to breathe, instinctively, desperately, unconditionally. We tried to get pregnant for years, and over time, that desire became a painful nail in my heart. It ached every time I saw the baby section of a store, every time someone posted a photo of an ultrasound on social media. Month after month, I stared at the same 2 lines, or rather, the lack of them. I heard dry negatives from doctors. I sat in chairs in procedure rooms, clenching my fists, while a nurse inserted a needle into my vein. We tried everything: diets, procedures, drugs, prayers, advice from dubious specialists. And Jason, he kept telling me that we could do it together, that we were a team, that he was there for me, no matter what. Turns out that there was someone else, or rather, 2 others. 4 months ago, I took his phone number just to see what wine he wanted to buy. We were discussing dinner, but when I opened the screen, I saw messages, first one, then another, eventually, correspondence with 2 different women who were clearly not just colleagues, and one message, written like a knife on glass: "Do you think we should have another one?" With a photo of the baby. It turned out that while I was crying over unsuccessful IVF and spending my salary on treatment, he was making children with his mistress, not 1, but 2. One of them gave birth to his child twice. Divorce, it was like a war in slow motion, dry legal terms, cold lawyers, strange offices. But the worst thing was what he said. He said that all of this was my fault, because I couldn't give birth, because my body couldn't cope, and so, in his words, he had to look for what he was missing. It was as if he was saying that I myself chose to be infertile, that I liked the needles, the tears, the humiliation, the months of hope and disappointment that ate away at me from the inside. I looked at him, this stranger with whom I had lived for almost a decade, and I didn't understand who was in front of me. It almost broke me. I became like an empty shell, living by inertia, breathing but not feeling. That's why when my mother called me a month ago and said that they were planning a family trip to Hawaii, it was like a call for a life preserver. "You have to come with us, Lillian," she said in her warm, confident voice. "You need to get away, heal, be with your family, get back to yourself." I nodded, not even noticing how a tear rolled down my cheek. My mother always knew what I needed, even when I couldn't articulate it myself. And she was right. I needed something to look forward to, something to give my days meaning. The idea of warm beaches, the sound of waves, tropical cocktails, and people who really loved me, it felt like more than just a vacation, it felt like salvation. For the first time in a long time, I felt that little thrill of anticipation I'd forgotten. I went to the mall, bought some bright summer dresses, updated my swimsuits, and even got a nautical-themed pedicure, blue-green waves and tiny shells on my big toe. When Barbara found out I was coming, she hugged me as if she were pulling me out of icy water. "Livy can't wait," she said, laughing. "First plane. First ocean. You should see her packing her stuffed bunnies in her backpack already." The morning of the flight was clear, the sun just beginning to rise. When I loaded my hot pink suitcase into the back of an Uber and climbed in, the cabbie listened to the morning news, and I looked out the window, feeling something melt inside me. The airport was noisy, flight announcements, bustle, the smell of coffee and hand sanitizer. I walked inside, looking around, and finally saw them, my parents. My parents were sitting on uncomfortable plastic chairs, my mother reading something on her phone, my father trying to tame the boarding card. Barbara was standing nearby, adjusting the bandage on Livy's head, who was waving happily at me, as if we hadn't seen each other for a year instead of 2 weeks. "Aunt Lillian!" came a shrill, joyful voice from the crowd of passengers, and before I could really react, my niece was running towards me, her little arms outstretched with such a sincere desire for a hug that I felt my chest clench from something very similar to happiness. She was wearing a light dress with a floral pattern, small yellow daisies on a blue background fluttered with every step she took, and on her head were 2 neat pigtails, braided, judging by the tight elastic bands, by Barbara herself. I dropped to one knee and hugged her, feeling her warm little body pressed against my neck, and for a second all the noise of the airport became somehow distant and insignificant. "Hello, my sweet," I whispered, inhaling the aroma of her baby shampoo. "You've grown so much. They told us there were giant turtles in the water in Hawaii," she whispered conspiratorially, looking into my eyes as if she were revealing an ancient secret. "Oh? And you're going to look for them?" "Of course, Mom said they swim right next to people." Barbara came over at that moment, and before I could get up, she was hugging me so tightly, as if she were afraid I would disappear from her life again. "Perfect timing," she said, almost whispering, and there was so much in those 2 words, relief, concern, guilt, love, all mixed up like thick syrup. "Listen, Lily," she continued, pulling away and looking me in the face, "could you do me a huge favor?" She pointed toward the food court, where the line looked bearable from a distance. "Livy's been asking for water for 10 minutes now, and the line there looks shorter than the one at our gate. Could you get a bottle?" I looked where she pointed, a small food court, brightly colored signs, the smell of coffee, roasting something, and indeed, the line didn't look intimidating. "Sure, I'll be right back," I replied, waving at Livy and heading there, checking the boarding time on my phone. We had about 45 minutes, plenty of time, I thought. But, as often happens, distance deceives. The line, which seemed short, turned out to be a real snake, slowly wriggling towards the counter, and, as luck would have it, that day the service was moving at a snail's pace. I stood, shifting from foot to foot, catching phrases from the conversations around me, checking my phone every few minutes. Everything was moving slowly, and I was already starting to feel a little uneasy when I heard someone call out from behind me, "Lillian? My God, is that really you?" I turned around and there was Jessica, my college roommate whom I hadn't seen in over a year. Everything about her was as I remembered, her sincere eyes, her head tilted slightly to the side, as if she were listening to you even in silence. "Jessica? What are you doing here?" "I'm flying to Denver on a business trip," she replied. "And you?" "Hawaii, family vacation, first since everything, well, you know," she nodded knowingly, and we started talking. 20 minutes flew by. She told me about her job at a pharmaceutical company, about her children, one in college, the other just starting high school, and I, in turn, confided in her about the divorce, the pain, the betrayal, and, to my surprise, I felt relieved. Jessica didn't try to pity me, didn't beat around the bush like so many others who were afraid to hurt my fragility. She simply listened, like a friend, like someone who understands that life doesn't always fit into pretty photos on social media. Her words about new beginnings and brighter days ahead were spoken effortlessly, with warmth and faith. and I suddenly realized how much I had missed that. When I finally got the treasured bottle of water, said goodbye to Jessica, and turned to go back to my family, I was struck by the feeling that I had been gone too long. I quickened my pace, then broke into a run, weaving between suitcases and people, hoping that they were still waiting for me there, at that very gate, but when I got there, my heart sank. They were not there. I stood there, looking around, feeling anxiety rising in my chest. Maybe they had just walked away? Moved to other chairs? But no, I glanced around the entire waiting area, and then I saw her. In the middle of a large open space, all alone, stood Livy. She clutched her pink purse in both hands, as if she were holding on to it like an anchor in a storm. Her eyes were wide and fearful. I rushed to her side, fell to my knees, and hugged her close, as if that would erase her confusion. Baby, where is everyone? Where is Mommy and Grandma and Grandpa? She looked at me with her huge eyes and said, barely audible, they flew away. Mommy said you would take care of me, and told me to wait here for you. My hand shook. I stood up and looked around again, empty. The board above us showed mercilessly that the flight to Honolulu had left 15 minutes ago. They flew away, without me, without her. Honey, did Mommy leave you anything? Anything for me? She nodded, opened her purse, rummaged through it with tiny fingers, and handed me a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it, the handwriting. I would recognize it among 1,000. Barbara, the note, folded carelessly, as if hastily, without much care for who would read it or how they would feel, read, Lillian, you keep saying you want a baby. Here's your chance to spend time with one. We've changed flights to leave early. Don't worry. We'll have a relaxing vacation. Take care of her, Barbara. I read those lines over and over, as if hoping to find in them something else, a more reasonable explanation for what had happened. Although inside everything had already broken off, any attempt to justify it had disappeared like smoke from a match. I sat there, holding Livy tightly to me, feeling her warm head buried in my chest, her fingers clutching my sweater. And two feelings were fighting inside me at once, a rage such as I had never known, and a pain as deep as a well from which you can't see the bottom. How could my own sister, my blood, my Barbie, leave this tiny creature, her daughter, alone, in a crowded airport, among thousands of indifferent faces and hurrying feet, simply because she wanted to vacation? The note in her handwriting burned my fingers like a hot iron. The worst thing was not that they had flown away, it was that I, a grown woman, literally 100 feet away, chatting with a friend and did not notice how she was left. Livy was alone for almost 30 minutes, half an hour in which anything could have happened. She could have gone looking for me, she could have wandered outside the safety zone, she could have disappeared, someone could have taken her away and I wouldn't have even known. My head spun, and for a moment I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to push the images away. Baby, were you scared? I breathed, trying to keep my voice even. She nodded, her bottom lip quivering like a leaf in the wind. There were so many people there, she whispered, pressing herself against me. I didn't know where to go. And then it hit me like lightning. How? How could my sister, my mother, get on a plane knowing that her daughter was alone in a crowd? How could my parents, my mom and dad, the same ones who had once kept Barbara and me from playing outside on the sidewalk, be a part of this? How could they look Livy in the face, put her in a chair, straighten her dress, and still leave her? I pulled out my phone, my fingers shaking with rage, but I started typing. Barbara, what the hell is wrong with you? How could you abandon your daughter? This is not a joke, this is not a mistake, this is betrayal. Parents, did you really agree to this? I can't believe you were a part of this. I hit send, knowing that there would likely be no response. They'd probably landed by now, probably sipping pineapple cocktails and taking selfies with the ocean in the background, while I was here, trying to fix not only the baby but my own wounded soul. Come on, honey, I said, forcing myself to speak calmly, let's get your things and go home. We went back to my apartment, where everything seemed unusually quiet, as if the very atmosphere had been disoriented by what had happened. I heated up some macaroni and cheese, the one thing I knew she would definitely eat, and we sat in front of the TV to watch cartoons. Livy sat next to me, silent, her legs tucked under her, like a small animal whose usual burrow had just been destroyed. Outwardly, she seemed calm, even smiling from time to time, but I saw how her eyes darted around all the time, as if she was still looking for her mother. During the commercial break, she suddenly turned to me and asked, "Aunt Lillian, when is Mom coming home?" I swallowed, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "I don't know, honey. She went on vacation with her grandparents. Why didn't I go?" Did I do something bad? That was the moment when my heart literally broke. How do you explain to a 5-year-old that she wasn't abandoned because she was bad, but because the adults around her were weak? Selfish? Irresponsible? I took her hand, squeezed it tightly, so she knew. "I'm here, I'm not leaving, honey." Sometimes adults make terrible mistakes, sometimes they think with something other than their heads. But you didn't do anything bad, you're the best girl in the world, it's not your fault, okay? That night, after I put her to bed in the spare room, I got her some soft pajamas, gave her my old plush blanket, and even turned on a blue nightlight so she wouldn't be scared. I went down to the kitchen, put the kettle on, and just sat there, unable to move. I felt more than just anger building inside me, it was fury, searing and piercing, as if someone had splashed boiling water on my soul. My sister, my family, who were they to me now? How could I ever look again into the eyes of people who had abandoned a child like a suitcase in a storage locker? And then I remembered Mark, Barbara's ex-husband. She always described him in vivid colors: irresponsible, lying, unfaithful, didn't pay child support, wasn't interested in our daughter. We believed her because she was ours, but now I saw what she was capable of, and I began to doubt, was that the whole story? I found his number in my phone, the one that had once been saved as "Mark, do not answer," and pressed call. "Hello," came the voice on the other end, tired but alert. "Lillian? Is everything okay?" "Mark, it's urgent." Barbara. She left Livy alone at the airport. She flew to Hawaii with my parents and abandoned her. "If you want to see your daughter, come now." "I'll be right there," he said and hung up. He arrived 2 hours later. He brought a large doll with him, wrapped in colored paper. When Livy saw him, she froze for a second, as if she couldn't believe her eyes, and then she ran to him, squealing with joy. "Daddy." "Hello, princess," he whispered, kneeling down and hugging her. He was crying, really, truly, from the heart. Watching Livy, her cheek pressed against Mark's shoulder, smiling faintly, her tiny fingers clinging to his shirt as if afraid he would disappear again, and him, trembling, stroking her hair and whispering something tender in her ear, I suddenly realized with unexpected clarity. This man loved his daughter truly, deeply, unconditionally, with all his heart. There was none of that coldness in him that I had once attributed to him, and everything that Barbara had told me about him seemed to suddenly crumble to dust. He was not the one who abandoned the family, he was the one who was pushed out of the family, who was not given a chance. After Livy, tired from the excitement of the day, finally fell asleep in my bed, curled up with a plush bunny in her arms, Mark and I went into the kitchen. I put the tea on, even though I knew I wouldn't drink a sip, and he leaned heavily on the counter and said, "Lillian, everything Barbara told you, it was a lie." He took out his phone, scrolled through the gallery, and showed me screenshots, text messages between Barbara and three different men. I saw phrases that made my cheeks flush, candid, unashamed discussions of hotel meetings, false explanations of how she was supposedly staying late at work or going to see a friend. He showed photographs taken by a private investigator, Barbara kissing another man in a parking lot, Barbara leaving a hotel in the early morning, Barbara hugging someone who was definitely not her husband. I even took a DNA test, he said dully. Not because I didn't believe she was my daughter, but because I doubted how deeply I had been deceived. Fortunately, Livy really is mine. I nodded, processing what I'd heard, my insides clenching with anger. Mark, if you had all this, I said quietly, why didn't you sue? Why didn't you show it during the custody battle? He looked down, as if he were ashamed of the question. I was embarrassed, he admitted. I didn't want the whole town to know that my wife was sleeping around. I didn't want to look pathetic. I didn't want my daughter to ever find this on the internet. I just wanted to protect her. And you let Barbara make you out to be a bad father? I asked, my voice filled with surprise and reproach. I thought you'd just abandoned them. I was wrong, but now you have a chance to fix it. He looked at me hopefully. Will you help me? Absolutely, I said with a firmness I hadn't felt in a long time. What she did today is unforgivable. We need evidence, video footage, so that no one has any doubts. I already called my lawyer, he answered, taking out his phone. On Monday morning, we will file a formal request for the airport footage. She will not escape responsibility. For the first time since the divorce, I felt like I was doing something truly important. My sister had crossed the line, and now it was clear, she would have to answer for it. The next 2 weeks were filled with events, as if Mark and I were involved in a real legal campaign. We collected documents, prepared statements, reviewed, like a detective series, screenshots, printouts, photos, everything that could shed light on who really cared about Livy. Mark's lawyer acted quickly and decisively. By Wednesday, we had filed a request to modify the custody arrangement and a formal petition to obtain the airport footage. He confidently told us that the courts, especially in cases like this, are extremely strict about child abandonment, and having a video of a mother leaving the airport, leaving her 5-year-old daughter alone, could be a deciding factor. This is going to look terrible, the lawyer said during one of the meetings, shuffling through papers. The child was in a public place unattended for 30 minutes. We'll add to this the evidence we already have, scandalous messages, behavior incompatible with responsible parenting. We have everything we need to modify the custody arrangement. While we waited for the legal process to move forward, Mark continued to share with me what he'd learned about Barbara over the past 6 months. It's worse than I could have imagined, he admitted, opening Instagram on his phone. Look at this. He began scrolling through her profile. There was literally everything: clubs, parties, noisy gatherings with friends, cocktails, laughter. Almost every night she posted a new photo: Barbara with a glass of wine, Barbara with a shot, Barbara on the bar, Barbara hugging men whose faces she did not mark. Look at what she's holding in each photo, he said quietly, and I did notice, each frame was accompanied by alcohol. It was like she was keeping a diary of her addiction, I whispered, not believing my eyes. And all this time she had to take care of her daughter? She posted these photos while I begged her to give me more time with Livy, while she said the child was sick, busy, in kindergarten, and she herself was in clubs. He looked down, and there was no anger in his voice, but fatigue. I feel like an idiot for letting her control the situation for so long. I took his hand. Mark, we both know the truth now, and you're not alone now. We're going to fix this, for Livy, for her future. Look at the timestamps, Mark said, swiping his finger across the screen of his phone, where Barbara's Instagram page was open. This one was posted at 2 in the morning on Tuesday. Look, I leaned in closer and saw my sister, in a low-cut dress, posing with a martini glass, her eyes slightly misty, her lips parted in a fake smile. Who watches the kid when she's out partying until 2 in the morning? He added quietly. The question hung in the air, heavy as a brick, because the answer was obvious: no one. The evidence kept mounting, each one heavier and more painful than the last. Mark wasted no time in hiring the same private detective who had helped him confirm his suspicions of Barbara's infidelity during their marriage. This guy, it turned out, was a real master of his craft, meticulous, patient, and ruthlessly precise. He had collected not just information, but a dossier: dates, videos, receipts, routes, even the time of day when certain events took place. This video was taken 3 weeks ago, Mark said, handing me the phone. I glanced at the screen. The video showed a nightclub parking lot, where dim streetlights cast flickering shadows. Barbara swayed on her heels, stumbled, dropped her keys, tried to open the car door, clinging to the handle. She was drunk, that much was obvious. Then the camera zoomed in, and I saw a silhouette in the back seat, Livy, sleeping, serene, unaware that her mother was about to drive her home in such a state. My heart sank, as if someone were squeezing it with their palms. She was driving home drunk with our daughter, Mark repeated. And I have 4 videos like that, different dates, different clubs, but always Livy in the car with her. Mark, why didn't you call the police? This isn't just irresponsible, it's dangerous, criminal, I breathed out, not looking up from my phone. I wanted to build a full case, he said, and his voice was even, but there was a hint of weariness in it. One incident might not be enough for the court to change custody, but repeated behavior, especially documented. He shrugged. I had no room for error, everything had to be perfect. He showed me her credit card statements, which literally shocked me. Over the past 2 months, she had spent more than $3,000 on clothes, designer dresses, shoes, accessories, another $1,500 on procedures in salons, manicures, massages, coloring, styling, waxing, almost 1,000 in restaurants and bars. Remember, she hasn't worked for 2 months, he added quietly. All the spending is from alimony, my money, the same money that was supposed to go to food, clothes, school for Livy. And the operation? I asked, remembering a casual remark about plastic surgery. He nodded and took out another folder. $8,000, breast implants, paid exactly 2 weeks after I transferred her another payment. He smiled bitterly. Now look at this. He laid out in front of me the photographs taken by the same detective, Livy, in a stretched-out t-shirt, pants barely covering her ankles, shoes, sneakers with holes in the toes. Her hair was tangled. It was obvious that it had not been cut for a long time. She looked neglected. There is no other way to describe it. She spends my money to look like a queen, Mark whispered, and our daughter walks around like a tramp. It makes me so angry, Lillian, that I can hardly think clearly. But, as terrible as it sounds, the most compelling evidence was yet to come. While Barbara lived in Hawaii, posting several pictures every day from the beach, with cocktails, with new parios, with another carefree face, she almost did not remember the existence of her daughter. In 2 weeks she sent me only one message, Mark said, and I'll show it to you now. He handed me his phone, and I read, how is she doing? Everything, no phone call, no video call, no messages of interest, concern, or care. One question, dry as a bank statement. I told her everything was fine, Mark said, and that she would have a big surprise when she returned. And while she was having fun in the tropical paradise, Mark and I watched Livy every day. I looked after her, cooked food, read fairy tales, bought her new mermaid pajamas, and took her to the hairdresser, where she chose her own haircut for the first time. She became calmer, her shoulders no longer trembled from inner tension. As in the first days, she no longer asked about Barbara with the same obsessive anxiety as at the beginning. Sometimes, of course, she asked, children do not forget as easily as we would like, but more often she simply smiled, playing with Mark, and laughed heartily, as if there was finally room for happiness inside her. When Mark came to visit us, and this was almost every day now, and I didn't mind, Livy would literally light up like a Christmas tree. Daddy, she said one day, when he first walked through the door, can we go to the park today? Of course, princess, he said, scooping her up easily, anything you want. The sight of them together, walking down the sidewalk holding hands, Livy laughing loudly as she told her father about some cartoon character who, she said, ate too many bananas and exploded, broke my heart, but in the best possible way. There was something raw and genuine and real about their connection. She was literally glowing with happiness around him, and he was looking at her with such endless, quiet love that for a moment I felt something shift inside me, as if my cracked heart was beginning to mend. This little girl clearly adored her father, and he didn't hide his feelings for her for a second. It was painfully obvious that they belonged together, that their connection was deeper than any blood, and that nothing in the world could, or should, come between them. In the meantime, the Child Welfare Service had already assigned a social worker to investigate the situation. And one morning a middle-aged woman with neatly coiffed gray hair and a serious but not hostile expression appeared at my flat. Mrs. Patterson. She walked in, looked around, smiled politely and got down to business, asking questions with a delicate, almost maternal sensitivity. "How has she adjusted to living with you?" she asked, looking down at her papers. "To be honest," I answered, sitting down opposite her, "she seems much more balanced than I expected. She sleeps well, has a normal appetite, plays calmly. The only times I see anxiety in her are when she asks about her mother, and—" "How often does this happen?" she asked, without taking her eyes off her notebook. "Less and less, every hour, it seemed, in the first few days. Now, maybe once a day, no more often. Sometimes she doesn't ask at all." Mrs. Patterson took careful notes of everything I said, nodding occasionally, and then had a short conversation with Livy. I watched from the side as my niece calmly answered questions from the couch with a teddy bear in her lap. After the social worker left, just before bed, Livy nestled in my bed, whispered, "This lady asked me if I was scared at the airport." I told her I was, "But I'm not scared anymore because you and Dad take care of me." On Friday of the second week, we got the call we'd been waiting for with bated breath. Mark's lawyer came on the video call, his face focused, but his eyes shining with satisfaction. "We got the video from the airport," he said, "and Lillian, it's even better than we hoped. The footage clearly shows Barbara, your parents, and the child entering the terminal together, then the adults walking through the boarding area and boarding the plane, and Livy is left alone. She stands at the counter, holding her purse, looking around. Then sitting down in a seat, then standing up." He paused for a second. "The timestamp shows she was alone for 28 minutes, almost half an hour, a 5-year-old. Mark nodded, his lips pressed into a thin line. 28 minutes, he repeated, "That's insane." "The footage also shows," the lawyer continued, "other passengers paying attention to Livy. One woman comes over, sits down next to her, apparently asking if everything is okay. She's clearly concerned. Then there's a shot of Lillian returning. That's going to be key evidence. It's going to make a big impression in court. We spent that weekend together, me, Mark and Livy. Like some kind of informal but surprisingly close-knit family. We took her to the zoo, and as she ran from enclosure to enclosure, vying with each other to tell us about the animals she had learned about from books and cartoons, I caught Mark's gaze on me, grateful, warm, full of that trusting silence that doesn't need words. Livy held our hands tightly, one of mine, the other of her father's, and seemed to feel completely safe. "Aunt Lillian, look!" she exclaimed, pointing to the enclosure, "a baby elephant. He's hanging around his mother." "Yes, dear," I answered, leaning toward her. "Baby animals need their mothers and fathers to love them and protect them." "How do you and Dad protect me?" she asked, and I nodded, smiling through my tears. "Exactly, honey." Mark squeezed my hand tightly, and in that moment, something inside me finally clicked into place. For the first time in months, I felt like I belonged to something good, something real, something worth all the effort I'd put into it. After the divorce, after all the pain I'd been through, I'd felt broken, like a porcelain figurine, stripped of meaning, and now, helping Mark get back what had been taken from him so unfairly, I felt like I had a purpose again, like I was part of something meaningful again. On Sunday night, as Mark and I were discussing custody hearing dates, my phone vibrated. I glanced at the screen and saw a text from Barbara, brief, no greeting, no explanation. "Flight lands at 6 o'clock tomorrow. I'll be there by 8 to pick her up." The next morning, I woke Livy up with special care, as if this day were something else. I put on her favorite unicorn dress, the one that always made her feel especially beautiful, and braided her hair, neatly and evenly, just the way she liked. She had no idea that this evening would change her usual reality, and I honestly hoped that this happy ignorance would last at least a few more hours. Her ringing laughter, the way she bounced on her toes while I braided her hair, the way she adjusted the ribbons on the wrists of her favorite dress with violets. I wanted to preserve all this as long as possible. Is Mom really coming today? She asked, looking at me with slight wariness, as if she was afraid that I would say something evasive again. Yes, dear, I answered softly, smoothing her hair. Mom is returning from Hawaii today, but oddly, her face did not light up in the way I had hoped. She was not excited about the prospect, not in the way I would have expected from a child who had not seen her mother for almost 2 weeks. Will I see you and Daddy again? She asked, and there was more than just curiosity in her voice. There was anxiety, almost a plea. We'll work this out, okay? Don't worry about it now, just have a nice day. At exactly 7:30 p.m., there was a knock at the door. I already knew who it was. Mark was standing in the hallway, reserved and collected, with Mrs. Patterson from Child Services next to him, all in a business suit but with a kind, confident look. We exchanged nods, and when I opened the door wider, a tanned Barbara appeared on the threshold. Her wide smile was as artificial as her eyelashes, as if she had come to a friendly party rather than a meeting that would determine her daughter's fate. She stepped forward as if she expected to simply take the child and disappear, as if 2 weeks in paradise and all this had never happened, but her confidence instantly crumbled when her eyes fell on Mark. What is he doing here? She asked sharply, her voice no longer as polished as it had been, suddenly trembling and strained. Mrs. Patterson stepped forward. Ms. Barbara, I represent Child Protective Services. Temporary guardianship proceedings have been instituted against your daughter. Barbara's face went white, her lips trembled, but she didn't back down. What procedures? She hissed. Your ex-husband filed for emergency temporary guardianship based on your abandonment of the child. The court temporarily released the girl to her aunt's care until the hearing, Mrs. Patterson explained firmly. This is absurd. Barbara shrieked, turning to me. Lillian, how could you? We're sisters. You betrayed your family. I stepped forward. Barbara, you left your 5-year-old daughter alone, in a crowded airport, for 30 minutes. That's not a mistake, that's dangerous, that's neglect. I knew you'd take care of her. I left her a note, she screamed, defending herself as best she could. A note, I repeated. She was scared, she was shaking, she could have been stolen, she could have walked away. You put her in danger. Mark silently pulled out his phone. We have airport security footage, he said calmly. You're driving drunk, with your daughter in the back seat, receipts for your expenses, plastic surgery, salons, alcohol, all for the child support I sent you to take care of Livy. You were following me? Barbara snapped. You're sick. You were spying on me. I documented your negligence, Mark replied coldly. The judge will see everything. Barbara was at a loss, the confidence in her posture was gone, leaving only panic, pure and simple. She started screaming, resorting to insults, shouting rude things at me, accusing me of betraying her, of ruining her life, as if I were the one who abandoned her child. She lunged forward, but Mrs. Patterson stepped in front of her. Ma'am, you need to calm down, your behavior is being recorded for the court record. But Barbara couldn't stop herself, a storm was raging in her eyes. She threw her purse at Mark, then turned sharply to me and swung, but I managed to step back. Mrs. Patterson immediately called security. This behavior is a matter of grave concern, she told the officers who arrived. A parent who cannot control their emotions cannot provide a safe environment for a child. Barbara was literally escorted out of the apartment. She was struggling, screaming, spitting anger. Livy, who had been peeking out of the kitchen, pressed herself against me in fear, hiding her face behind my back, her hands tightly clutching the hem of my blouse. After everything had quieted down and the door had closed, Behind Barbara, Mrs. Patterson dropped to the child's level and asked softly, almost in a whisper, "Honey, are you okay?" Livy nodded, but didn't move away from me. "Is Mommy sick? Why is she so angry?" "Sometimes grown-ups get upset," Mrs. Patterson said kindly, "but you're safe now, you're with Auntie and Dad, and they love you very much." My phone rang right after she left. Mom, then Dad, then Mom again. I didn't answer. They kept calling dozens of times, nonstop, each voice filled with rage, reproach, accusation. "How could you?" Mom demanded. "You betrayed your family, drop the lawsuit right now. Barbara made a mistake, but she shouldn't lose her daughter." I listened in silence and felt a wave of something rising inside me, not anger. No, a solid, crystal clear awareness. They had seen everything and still made excuses for her. "She left the baby alone at the airport," I said out loud, not knowing if any of them could hear me. It wasn't a mistake. It was a conscious decision that put the baby in danger, she knew. "You take care of her," Mom countered in another entry. "Don't be dramatic." But I wasn't going to accept their definitions of right and wrong anymore. 30 minutes, that's how long the silent, anxious wait lasted for a little girl abandoned in a crowded airport, among unfamiliar faces, with a pink purse in her hands and a confusion in her eyes that no child should ever experience. And all that time, my niece was completely alone, without an adult to hold her hand, to explain, to comfort, to protect. Anything could happen, anything. And although I tried not to think about it, these thoughts, like mercury, seeped through the cracks of common sense, disturbed me at night, made me clench my fists and remember how desperately she clung to me when I found her. My parents refused to listen to the voice of reason. All my explanations, please, presented evidence. Everything crashed against the cold, impenetrable wall of their ideas about loyalty. They cared more about the illusion of family unity than the real safety of their granddaughter. They did not want to listen, they didn't want to see it. They repeated like a mantra, "She knew you wouldn't keep the baby," as if that justified everything. The custody hearing was scheduled for the following week. Mark's lawyer did a great job, presenting in court materials that were inescapable: airport security footage, medical reports, documents proving her alcohol addiction, expense reports, photos, and videos collected by a private investigator. Everything was structured clearly, logically, indisputably. The hearing, contrary to my expectations, was almost calm, not because there was no emotion, but because Barbara gave in too quickly. She couldn't contain herself. Every time Mark's lawyer presented another piece of evidence, she jumped up, screamed, interrupted. "Your Honor, that's a lie!" She screamed when the court was shown a video of her stumbling along in a car with Livy in the back seat. The judge asked her to calm down several times and made some harsh comments. And when they showed a video from the airport, where Livy was left alone and the adults were boarding a plane, she completely lost it. She threw a bottle of water at the screen. "Miss Barbara, one more behavior like this and you will be held in contempt of court," the judge said firmly, without raising his voice. "This is all Lillian," Barbara screamed, pointing at me. "She's just jealous. She doesn't have children, but I do. She's angry that I became a mother, and she couldn't." Even her lawyer looked down, clearly not wanting to have anything to do with this madness. The judge made a decision quickly, without delay, based on the evidence presented, including video evidence of abandonment and materials indicating repeated neglect of parental responsibilities. He said calmly but firmly, "Full custody is transferred to the father. Mother is temporarily suspended from visiting until she has completed a full course of alcohol abuse and anger management treatment. Evaluation will be done by specialists upon completion of the programs." Barbara was escorted from the room by security guards, still screaming, waving her arms, accusing everyone around her of conspiring. That same day, I received a letter from my parents, cold, formal, full of reproach. They condemned me for betrayal, for breaking up the family. It hurt. There's no point in lying to yourself that it was easy, but deep down I knew I had done the right thing. I wasn't protecting my sister, or old traditions, or the illusion of unity. I was protecting a child, that same girl who was now safe, with a father who adored her, who would sacrifice everything to make her happy. Mark placed Livy in a wonderful preschool, and I watched her blossom. She made friends, became more confident, more cheerful. I stayed close. She came over for dinner twice a week. We went for walks on weekends, baked cookies, drew on the floor with crayons. Every time she put her thin arms around me, calling me Aunt Lillian, I felt that somewhere deep inside, something I had long thought lost was blossoming: warmth, purpose, love. A few months later, I learned that Barbara had completed treatment for alcohol addiction after all, and although my initial reaction was wary, I couldn't help but feel a little relieved. Maybe this painful experience would be a turning point for her after all. Maybe she would be the mother Livy really needed. I had no illusions, but I wanted to believe. The whole story, oddly enough, turned out to be exactly what I needed. I no longer lived in the memories of my own divorce, or blamed myself for the empty bed and the silence in the house. Instead, I focused on the present, on protecting my child, on love, on restoring justice. It gave me purpose. It reminded me that despite the diagnosis, despite the infertility, I could still be important. I could be a mother, not biologically, but essentially. My ex-husband once told me that I was a worthless woman because I couldn't give him children. He screamed at me that I was empty, that it was impossible to build a family with me. But now I knew, he was wrong. Motherhood is not only biology, it is love, patience, dedication, and a willingness to put the interests of the child above all else. And by that definition, I have been a mother more in these few weeks than my sister has been in the last 5 years. I have no regrets. Livy is safe, she is loved, she is surrounded by care, she has a father who truly fought for her, and there's an aunt who will always be there, at any moment, in any storm. Sometimes, to do the right thing, you have to go against your own blood. Sometimes it costs you your entire family, but I would make that choice again, because taking risks for a child's well-being is always worth it. I sleep soundly. I know I saved a little girl, and maybe someday Barbara will be the mother her daughter needs. Until then, Mark and I will take care of her. We love her, we choose her, every day.